All right, back on the track now of the chronology. Steve, as you can read in the Isaacson book, Steve was adopted. His parents were, his father was a machinist at Spectra Physics. His mother was a payroll person at Varian Associates. They didn't have a lot of money. Reed was kind of expensive. I don't even know what it cost. I'd have been $6,000 a year. That was expensive in 1972. Steve got to Reed, and as he said, he just felt like he was spending his parents' life savings to be at college. And he didn't. Steve was always doing this value for dollar thing. And at the time, I remember being amazed that he didn't think college credits were somehow going to be useful in his life, right? Because that's what he had to be thinking. He was thinking, all right, I'm paying how many thousands of dollars? What am I really going to get? I'm going to get a college credit. And he just decided he didn't need college credits, but he wanted the college experience. And so this is the famous story that's been told many times. He went to the dean, Dean Dudman, and he said, I really can't afford this. I'm going to withdraw, but can I audit classes? And that was a fairly easy decision. And he could see that Steve was bright. And so he said, yes, you can audit classes. And then, so then Steve got all his tuition money back. That was within the first month. Then he goes back to the dean again and he goes, well, I see that there are lots of students dropping out. Because Reed has a reputation for having, being academically rigorous. Huge reading list. And there's a lot of pressure at Reed. And so students are dropping out by the first month. And so Steve goes and asks the dean if he can stay in one of these empty dorm rooms. It's a story that's worth telling, because I didn't actually know this at the time. I really didn't even know. He mentioned it to me, but the chutzpah that he had to go ask the dean if he can take classes for free, and then to ask if he can stay in a dorm room for free, that's quite remarkable. And it says a lot about his character. Now, I didn't really see that part of his character. We were just talking about philosophy and spirituality. Anyway, that's the Steve I met in 1972. We were friends that whole first year. We used to, Reed had a nice campus, kind of like Princeton, old Gothic buildings, lots of big lawns. It was a nice place to hang out. We spent a lot of time just hanging out at the student union and talking. I wasn't really in any classes with Steve. We discovered, so early on we were interested in the Eastern spirituality, so we discovered that there was a Hare Krishna temple in Portland, but it was all the way across town. We used to hitchhike. Sunday nights, every Sunday night, they would have a love feast at the Krishna temple. And we were students. We weren't on the meal plan. Steve and I would hitchhike across town to the Krishna temple and gorge ourselves on the Indian food and then chant for a while. Well, you would chant first and then get fed. But anyway, we did that a lot that first year. And so, let's see, the other part of the story was Robert Friedland was the student body president at Reed. And the summer after our freshman year, 1972, he actually did go to India and hooked up with Ram Dass and went to the Neem Karoli. It was an ashram, but it was so Neem Karoli passed away in 1973, or early 74. Once the Be Here Now book came out, it was a very popular book. Hundreds and hundreds of Western hippies started showing up at the guy's ashram, which is in the rural area in India. And so it got to be this big scene. Like there are pictures, like a crowd several times the size of this. Anyway, Robert Friedland had gone and was part of that scene. And the next year, he came back to Reed, and he's talking about this. And he's the one who put Steve up to the trip to go to India. And the ticket to India was $800. I didn't have any money. So Steve proposes this trip to India to me, and I said, okay, that sounds fine, but I don't have any money. I don't think my parents are going to give me that ticket. And Steve had already got a job at Atari, so he was making money at $5 an hour, but he was making thousands of dollars, and so he offered to buy my ticket for me, so I was in. So that was how our trip to India came about. It was also, this was 1974, and it was the Kumbh Mela. So there was another Kumbh Mela this summer. It's the biggest gathering on earth. So this year, how many of you have heard of the Kumbh Mela? 1, 2. All right. It's the Hindu. Okay, in the Middle Ages, people went to Canterbury for religious pilgrimage, or people go to religious pilgrimage to Mecca. This is the religious pilgrimage of India with all its 800 million people. And the Kumbh Mela was 100 million people this year. 100 million people. 30 million at the peak in one place. 30 million people. It's quite a phenomenon. Even in 1974, it was millions of people, although they didn't have satellite imagery. They didn't really know how many millions of people because you couldn't really count them. Anyway, I didn't get to go to the Kumbh Mela. I was finishing my exams at Reed. Steve got impatient, and he went off to India by himself. Went to the Kumbh Mela, hooked up with some other people he met somewhere, got sick, turned around and came back. And so when I finally hooked up with him in downtown Delhi, he was done with the Kumbh Mela, didn't want to go back. Anyway, we had 4 months traveling around India. People want me to write that memoir. What was it like traveling in India with Steve Jobs? Well, it was kind of anticlimactic. Not a lot happens. Steve was more on the trail of looking for a holy man than I was. I'm more of an academic person. I was actually carrying a big stack of books and reading all the time. Because in India, you spend a lot of time just like sitting around waiting for a bus, waiting for a train, waiting in lines. Steve was much more interested in a physical contact with a guru. He was looking for his guru. He actually said that in some interview. Anyway, he didn't find his guru. We went to some interesting places. We had some experiences, but it's not a book. It's a chapter in a book. As long as we're on the subject, I'm actually now got the idea of the book I'm going to write. It might take me a year or two, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the chapter of our trip to India and my memories of what I've just been telling you of knowing Steve as a freshman. But the interesting idea is I'm the only person who really is the expert on all the books that we were reading. So I'm going to do a little survey for my book, which will be the 24 books that we read that led to us going to India, of which, none of them are secret. It's just the interesting collection of things that we read and what we thought about them. And now that all those gurus are dead, it's a reasonable project to have a retrospective, to look back on that stuff.